Hello and welcome to another Nyxus guide. This one is on every monster or being that appears in the journal of the first Witcher game. Now, this is a big one, and there are a lot of entries. There's almost 50 of them, so I wanted to record this really quick before just to throw out a few things. It's not going to be in order of appearance. I've tried to group a lot of them together, like all the necrophages are together, all the vampires are together. That being said, there are quite a few of them that don't have any classifications, like the Bloodswiger, the Zoogle, the Frightener. I've tried my best to fit some into the categories I think they would be in, and others are just listed at the end. And some stuff might not quite be right, but it's the best I can. So, without ado, here's the Witcher Bestiary. A Witchman is by some called a Witcher. Summoning him is dangerous, yet he must be called at times. When none can stand against an accursed monster, a Witchman will. Do not touch the Witchman, for you will become mangy. Remember also to hide the lasses from him, for the Witchman is lecherous beyond imagination. Though the Witchman craves silver, never pay him more than the following: a silver penny for a drowner, 2 silver pennies for a werecat, 4 silver pennies for a vampire. While the bestiary entry as a whole is a joke, it does provide an interesting view on the Witchers from a normal person's point of view. Witchmen roam the roads where monsters live. They spend winters in their keeps, where they plot and perfect their swordsmanship. Witchmen never get ill and tend to be resistant to venoms and charms, for they are themselves enchanted beings. They run from the sound of church bells. Their greed for women is only surpassed by their greed for silver. A Witchman is a master of the sword and sinister spells. It seems that the proposed method of mutation leads nowhere. Fast, agile, and aggressive creatures are born as a result of the transformation. However, they lack intelligence. They are closer to animals than men. Of course, that does not mean we will not find any practical use for them. On the contrary, simplified mutating procedures guarantee that we can create many mutants, which are perfect tools for spreading chaos and terror. Mutants are an enemy completely unique to the first game and appear nowhere else to my knowledge in Witcher lore. These creatures were created by Salamandra. They are failed experiments, botched attempts to create a perfect mutant. Similar to that of very dexterous and able humans, they are susceptible to steel swords. The fast style is advised when facing them. They're quick and agile, and these creatures try to outmaneuver their enemies. The Greater Mutant has proved to be disappointing. It turned out to be a beastly mutant with superhuman strength, terrifying cruelty, and scarce intelligence. Fortunately, our masters were satisfied. The Greater Mutant has its place in their plans. I even think that our master's plan is mainly based on using such creatures. The Greater Mutants are just bigger, stronger versions of the regular mutants, but still a failure overall. These creatures were created by Salamandra. They are failed experiments, botched attempts to create a perfect mutant. They are similar to very strong and able humans, but susceptible to steel swords. The strong style is advised. These creatures are slow but strong. Their tough skin and thick muscles protect them from blows. With great pride and full responsibility, I must state that the experiment was successful. The race of superhumans we need more than meets our expectations, and will satisfy Jacques d'Aldersberg. Their combination of intelligence, endurance, and brutal force tamed only by loyalty to the Flaming Rose is the future of the world. Greater Brothers are the ultimate creation of Salamandra and arguably the perfect mutant. They are created through experiments with Witcher's potions and formulae. They are superhumans and perfect warriors who serve the Order of the Flaming Rose unquestionably in assault divisions. They feel neither fear nor pain and are resistant to enchantment, including the Axii sign. They cannot be disarmed and are immune to knockdown and stun attempts. They can be injured with a steel weapon, and they are slow but well-armed and strong. They use weapons skillfully. Their blow can stun. Unflappable confidence, strength, and courage. These are the Greater Brother's mottos. These virtues are indispensable for victory, but not sufficient on their own. Basic rules of war must not be ignored. While forming new units of knights, we need to remember about auxiliary divisions, which will provide the army with more flexibility on the battlefields around the world. Even the perfect mutant can't be used in all situations, and that is where these guys come in. The Mutant Assassins are created through experiments with Witcher's potions and formulae. They serve the Order of the Flaming Rose unquestionably by supporting its assault divisions. They feel neither fear nor pain, and they are resistant to hex attempts, including the Axii sign. They cannot be disarmed. They are immune to precise hits as well as knockdown and stun attempts. They can be injured with steel weapons, however. They are quick and mobile. Their combat skills match those of assault divisions, though their armor is inferior. They deliver precise blows that cause pain. The Vodyanoi are an ancient sentient race. They worship their own gods, and their priests deal with divine matters. Land dwellers know little of these underwater creatures and the cults which flourish among them, and what is known inspires fear. Deities of the deep lend their powers to Vodyanoi Priests, enabling them to cast curses and spells. There's not much to say about these guys except they're fish people. They rarely come ashore unless leading a division of warriors or pursuing a religious aim. They are resistant to incineration and hex attempts. Once set alight, they prove sensitive to fire, susceptible to blinding. Priests support their warriors with magic. They are able to heal allies and blind opponents. The sight of Vodyanoi Warriors striding ashore is a sign that a transgression has been committed against the fish people. Either the border to an underwater kingdom has been crossed, or a taboo under one of the many Vodyanoi religions has been violated. The warriors' primary duty is to guard the underwater kingdom, though when necessary they leave their domain to seek justice for some perceived harm. Both tasks are performed with precision and emotionlessly. They do not hesitate to sacrifice their lives in service to the powers of the deep. These are similar to the priests, except more offense-oriented. They come ashore to protect their underwater domains or to raid human settlements. They're resistant to incineration attempts, though once set alight, they prove sensitive to fire, susceptible to blinding. They grease their claws with oil, which causes pain, and are often supported by priests. That is not dead which can eternal lie, and with strange eons even death may die. Powers older than humanity slumber in the depths, where no sunrise disturbed them. Gods and demons sleep in underwater cities awaiting their times, and it is said that when the hour comes, they will awaken and bring annihilation to the world. One of those creatures, Dagon, rests at the bottom of the lake and is worshipped by Vodyanoi and lunatics. Dagon is an embodiment of strength and fury, and when he comes ashore, he becomes destruction incarnate. Forbidden books like the Hymns of Madness and Despair describe the ways to summon him, for he can only be called to a place dedicated to him. Dagon puts himself above all the other monsters of The Witcher, for he is literally a deity worshipped by his people. He is a mythical creature according to the legend. It rests at the bottom of a lake near the village of Murky Waters. Dagon is a deity, so he cannot be killed. The creature receives energy from its believer's faith, which might be his only weakness. When Dagon ventures out on land, destruction follows him. If you do happen to fell this god in combat, make sure you loot his body for the Dagon excretions. You can mix these in a potion with a little bit of Rebus, Aether, Hydragenum, and Vermilion to make yourself some Dagon sap. When consumed, the Dagon sap will give you the True Grit Strength upgrade, which gives you plus 50% damage when Geralt has less than 25% vitality. Whoever claims that dog is man's best friend has probably never tamed a wyvern. Dogs are probably the least monstrous monster in the game. They're domesticated animals. Even wild dogs tend to stay close to human settlements. They are immune to nothing, susceptible to fear and knockdown attempts. And as always, an experienced witcher knows to use the group style while fighting multiple. They attack in groups, taking advantage of numerical superiority. There was so much snow that winter that we had to dig tunnels just to get to the privy and had icicles in our pants by the time we got back. Wolves came out the forest, ate the cattle, and then surrounded the house. They were howling madly, surrounded by that pack of wolves. We felt like 3 little pigs. Wolves are basically the actually dangerous older brother of dogs, except they aren't that dangerous. They are immune to nothing, susceptible to knockdown attempts. The fast style is most effective against them, and experienced witchers will know to use the group style against multiple. They are very susceptible to steal. Wolves attack in groups using their numerical superiority to their advantage, just like dogs. During the first stage of research, we performed experiments on animals only. Having bred a mutated hound, we are certain that the potion formulae are suitable, and if we administer them to human subjects, we will achieve exactly what we seek. Another mutant created by Salamandra, except this time a hound, not a human. The beasts are trained and deployed in combat by hound masters. The hounds are armored and exceedingly fierce. They are immune to fear and resistant to stun attempts, but sensitive to steel. Armored hounds are led by mutated beast masters, and they act as reinforcements for other units. Drowners are scoundrels who ended their wicked lives in the water. Drowned alive or thrown into deep water after death, they turn into vengeful creatures which stalk the inhabitants of coastal settlements. These guys are one of the more common enemies that you will face throughout the game. They are found basically anywhere where there's water. In the sewers, in the swamp, by rivers, anywhere you name it. They are creatures of the night. They appear on the banks of ponds, lakes, and rivers. They're immune to bleeding, blinding, and poison attempts. They are fearless, immune to stun attempts, and the Axii sign. Though they are very sensitive to silver and susceptible to knockdown attempts, the fast style is most effective against drowners. Experienced witchers use the group style against multiple drowners. Typically, they will attack in large groups and take advantage of numerical superiority. Particularly strong and dangerous drowners are known as the Drowned Dead. Simple people see no difference between the Drowner and the Drowned Dead. Encountering either of them is equally deadly. We might suppose, though, that the most gloomy legends concern the Drowned Dead rather than Drowners. Visually speaking, there is no difference at all between these two. The Drowned Dead just happens to be a much stronger variant. The Drowned Dead are creatures of the night. They appear on the banks of ponds, lakes, and rivers. They are immune to bleeding, blinding, and poison attempts. They are fearless and immune to stun attempts and the Axii sign. They are, however, sensitive to silver and susceptible to knockdown attempts. The fast style is most efficient against them, and experienced witchers will use that group style while fighting multiple drowned dead. These creatures poison their victims with cadaverin. They often attack as a group. Ghouls are said to have been humans who were once forced into cannibalism, and after many years spent in dark crypts, underwent a horrifying transformation. Only human flesh can satisfy their eternal evil hunger, so they kill people and store the remains in the recesses of their lairs. Ghouls are one of the most basic necrophages you can fight in The Witcher, and are found pretty much anywhere there are dead bodies. They're encountered on battlefields as well as in cemeteries and abandoned crypts. Though they are resistant to common poisons, they are sensitive to silver and necrophage oil. The strong style is most efficient against ghouls, and experienced witchers of course use the group style while fighting multiple. A group of ghouls will try to knock an opponent down, surround him, and start eating him alive. Alghouls are ghouls which had been devouring corpses for so many years that human flesh becomes irresistible and they begin to prey on the living. They are seen in crypts and on battlefields, frequently surrounded by ghouls. Simple folk do not notice the differences between these two types of scavengers, unlike witchers, who know that the Alghoul is a more aggressive and challenging opponent. The Alghoul is basically the older, stronger brother of the ghoul. They appear in old necropolises and crypts, are immune to common poisons, and resistant to knockdown attempts. Though they are sensitive to silver, the strong style is most efficient against Alghouls, and experienced witchers use the group style while fighting multiple. They will try and knock down their victims and eat them alive. After the war with Nilfgaard, Graveirs became a real plague. Until then, the monsters were familiar only to specialists and professional beast killers. Thus, everyone mistook them for ghouls. Today, any child could give an accurate description of a Graveir, and people who have passed near battlefields or necropolises offer first-hand accounts of the horrible murders committed by these ruthless necrophages. The only visual difference between a ghoul and a Graveir are the 3 spikes on the upper back of a Graveir, but don't let that fool you, these guys are way stronger. They appear wherever they can find food, preferably human corpses, but any carcass will do. They are immune to common poisons and resistant to knockdown attempts. Tough skin and thick muscles protect them from blows, but they are sensitive to silver and necrophage oil. The strong style is most efficient against Graveirs. They will try to knock down their victims and eat them alive. Much has been written about ghouls and Graveirs since they are encountered by common people in times of war or in cemeteries. Cemetaurs are female Graveirs, rare and stronger than its Graveir husbands, but when they appear in a necropolis, they take it over. All ghouls respect them and must bow to them. Cemetaurs are the most powerful necrophage you will find in the game, and sort of rare, but much more common in the later game. They are found on battlefields and cemeteries just like other necrophages, immune to common poisons, resistant to knockdown and stun attempts, though they are sensitive to silver and necrophage oil. They will try to knock down their victims and eat them alive. This provides an ideal opportunity to use the Black Blood Potion. Devourers are often called night witches because they resemble old, ugly women and are famous for their witch-like viciousness. These creatures gorge themselves on human flesh, although they willingly eat carcasses. Above all, they crave flesh that is fresh and warm. Devourers hunt after dark in groups that peasants refer to as Sabbaths. They like to deceive their victims and torture them, but there is no truth to the tales of their midnight flights on broomsticks and their gingerbread houses. Devourers are another necrophage, this time more directly related to the hags of the third game. They are scavengers which live near human settlements, usually in caves and ruins. They are immune to conventional poisons and resistant to knockdown attempts. They are sensitive to silver and necrophage oil, but they will try to knock down their victims and eat them alive. Common people believe that fletters are dead heathens who turned into vampires and rose from their graves. Being vampires, they attack sleeping people and drink their blood. According to peasants, a man bitten by a fletter becomes a fletter himself. This is nonsense, obviously. Fletters are a type of vampire that do not look very humanoid, and this is due to them being known as a lesser vampire. They usually hunt in rundown city districts and are also found near cemeteries and in the wilderness. They are fearless and resistant to stun attempts. Like most vampires, they are sensitive to silver and vampire oil. One bite kills them if the intended victim has previously consumed black blood. They dive at opponents from the air, try to daze their victims, and drink their blood. Garkains, the filthiest of vampires, are uglier than even fletters. Since fletters are widely despised for their looks, it is easy to imagine how abominable Garkains must be. As vampires, the creatures drink blood, but they are also drawn to fresh meat, or even corpses. Garkains are often mistaken for gargoyles because they lurk on rooftops, waiting to dive at their victims. Garkains are another lesser beast-like vampire and are found most frequently at cemeteries or near abandoned buildings where they nest. They are fearless and resistant to stun attempts, sensitive to silver like all vampires, and vampire oil. They try to daze their victims and drink their blood. No other monster inspires so many myths and fallacies as the Alp. People believe that this vampire is able to turn into a black dog or a venomous toad. They mistake Alps for succubi, believing them to be lecherous and inclined to seduce handsome young men. Folk tales describe their charm and their beautiful, seductive voices, as well as their loathing of virgins. What is true beyond any doubt is that they move noiselessly and attack by surprise, rarely giving their victims as much as a chance to scream in terror. Alps are the basic, more feminine vampires you'll find in the game, and the second most powerful, only second to their sisters, the Bruxae. They are fearless and resistant to stun attempts, sensitive to silver and vampire oil, and they attack by surprise, try to daze their victims, and drink their blood. It is said that at night, Bruxae haunt attractive young men and drink their blood. These vampires move quietly in the dark to suddenly emerge near their victims. Bruxae are womanoids and may take the form of beautiful young girls, leading some to mistake them for water nymphs. But their long fangs and unrestrained thirst for blood always betray them. These are one of the most powerful vampires you will face in the first Witcher game. Along with Garkains as the male king, these are the female queens of vampires. Bruxae chose to live in ruins and abandoned human settlements, more rarely in caves and grottos. They are fearless and resistant to stun attempts, but they are sensitive to silver and vampire oil. They attack by surprise, try to daze their victims, and drink their blood. People say that Barghests are specters which materialize as ghastly dogs and persecute the living. According to some folk tales, these monsters are the scouts of the Wild Hunt. Other legends say the ghosts appear as a sign of divine retribution and embody revenge. However, all tales agree on one point. Barghests show the living no mercy. These are the prominent enemy in Chapter 1 as the outskirts are besieged all over by them. They are ghosts which come from the underworld only when summoned. They are fearless and cannot be poisoned. Though when they come from the underworld, they acquire bodies, so they can be stunned and experience pain, although they are somewhat resistant to these effects. Barghests are sensitive to silver and very susceptible to knockdown attempts. The fast style is most efficient against Barghests, and experienced Witchers, as always, will use the group style while fighting multiple. Beware when they try to surround their opponent and work as a group. Where one Barghest appears, more will follow. The Hellhound, referred to also as the Beast, is a creature of the underworld, a specter that assumes the form of a terrifying hound and tirelessly stalks its victims once it finds their trail. Peasants believe that the Hellhound embodies the vengeance of the gods, who send the beast to punish humans for their wickedness. The Hellhound is the big bad of Chapter 1, and as such, it is probably the first real enemy that most players will struggle with in the game. It might appear wherever dishonorable people live, and it is immune to most effects. It is a corporeal creature, so knockdown or stun attempts are possible, yet rarely successful. That being said, it is sensitive to steel, and the fast style is most effective against Hellhounds. Be wary as it is able to summon Barghests, and a Hellhound will trap its victims in a circle of fire and proceed to tear them to pieces. After defeating the Hellhound, you can loot its body for a Trace of the Beyond. If you take this to a campfire and add in 2 bits of Rebus and 1 bit of Vitriol, you will be able to make the Hellhound's Soul, which is another mutagenic potion. This one will give you 1 silver talent when you drink it. If you want to get rid of a Wraith, you must first find its body. Try searching on unhallowed ground or in the corner of the cemetery where outlaws are buried. When you dig up the corpse, you will discover that it is not rotten and that there is blood on its lips. Pierce the corpse with an aspen stake, cut off the head, and place it between the corpse's legs. To make certain that the Wraith will never return, set the corpse on fire. 1 false step will mean your demise. Wraiths are dotted around pretty much everywhere throughout the game, not in one specific area. They haunt the places where they died or were buried. They are specters which do not belong in this world. Sometimes they are summoned by magic, but more frequently unfinished business makes them linger in our world. They are immune to blinding and bleeding attempts, immune to fearless, poison, pain, and knockdown attempts, but they are sensitive to silver and specter oil. The suffering experienced by a Wraith makes the wounds it inflicts more painful. Nightwraiths are born of moonlight, wind, and the earth cooling after the heat of the day. They rise above the ground and whirl in a mad dance, which should not be seen by any mortal. If caught peeping, the mortal is blinded by moonlight, then taken into the circle and forced to dance until he expires, at times becoming a Nightwraith himself. Nightwraiths are the nightly counterpart to the Noonwraiths. They can appear on fields and meadows and are found after dark when the moon is high. They are specters, but at the same time they maintain a strong connection with the natural world. They see the living but cannot understand them, because the dead cannot hear the living. They are immune to blinding, poison, pain, and bleeding attempts, and they are fearless. They're sensitive to silver and specter oil. They are able to grasp the moonlight and blind their enemies with it. Noonwraiths are born at high noon out of heat, sadness, and the sweat of plowmen. In the hot air above the fields, they gather to dance madly, creating air vortexes, but the specters dislike being watched. Those who peep are forced to dance with them. Noonwraiths stop their dance when the sun goes down, once the abducted mortal is long dead from fear and exhaustion. Noonwraiths are one of the main focuses of Chapter 4, so you'll be seeing a lot of these things. They haunt cultivated fields and meadows, and always appear when the sun is high. They are specters, but at the same time they maintain a strong connection to the natural world. They see the living, but cannot understand them, because the dead cannot hear the living. They are immune to blinding, poison, pain, and bleeding attempts, and they are fearless, but they are sensitive to silver and specter oil. They are able to grasp sun rays and blind their enemies with them. The Wild Hunt is a horde of specters that roams the sky during storms and is an omen of disaster. The appearance of the Wild Hunt foreshadows war and woe, much as a comet does. The spectral Wild Hunt sometimes appears in nightmares of the cursed or those touched by destiny. The Wild Hunt is the overarching antagonist of the entire trilogy, constantly chasing Geralt, constantly wanting him to join their spectral horde. The Wild Hunt appears in the sky as a harbinger of war and other misfortunes. Some believe it to be simply a magical phenomenon and not a horde of specters. Elven sources refer to it as the Red Riders. No information is available about fighting the Wild Hunt. Warriors of the Wild Hunt do not have to fight. They inspire such terror that people cower after a mere glimpse. There are known instances of abductions by the Wild Hunt. Baron Wolfstein buried his face in his hands. His heart was throbbing. Suddenly the scent of his wife's blood and the blood of his children intensified. The Baron's body swelled as his muscles grew. His noble attire fell in tatters on the marble floor. "My beloved, you are so hairy. You are a werewolf?" Bianca went pale. "What about our love?" In reply, she heard a terrifying roar. Even the classic werewolf makes an appearance in the Witcher universe, though it looks a little strange in the first game. It is a lycanthrope, which means that it is a shape changer. Humans transform into werewolves as a result of curses. The creatures lurk near human settlements. They are resistant to steel and most effects. Though they are sensitive to silver, they attack with fury and like to be on the offensive, confident of their resistance to conventional weapons. After killing the werewolf, you can make sure to grab its fur because you can make another mutagen potion from it. You can make the werewolf's wrath if you add in a little bit of aether, quebrith, hydragenum, and vermilion, and that will get you the werewolf's wrath, which once drank, it will give you the dexterity upgrade Predator that gives you attack 50% and dodge 50% between midnight and dawn. Where does it come from? Spells? Magic? I have no idea, sire. The sages research these phenomena. For us Witchers, it is enough to know that strong will may create them. We also like to know how to fight them. And kill them? Most frequently, yes. That is what we are usually paid for. Few want the spell lifted. People usually just want to be protected. If the monster has killed people, revenge may be another motive. Strigas, one in particular, are a main focus of the first Witcher game and in the novels. A Striga may tolerate necrophages. She needs a hideout during the day, often choosing a sarcophagus in a forgotten branch of a crypt. They are resistant to steel but sensitive to silver. A Striga may be freed from her curse by those who survive a night near her sarcophagus. A Striga is a very strong and agile creature, but not as resilient as she might seem. She attacks by sunrise and tries to tear opponents to pieces without giving them a chance to fight back. Near her sarcophagus, a Striga is always stronger. The Striga always uses the blinding critical effect. If you do decide to kill the Striga, you can then cut out her heart. Add a little bit of vitriol, aether, and hydragenum, and you will get yourself the Striga's Urge. When consumed, it will give you 1 bronze and 1 silver talent. Cockatrices are born of eggs laid by roosters consorting with other roosters. The egg must be incubated for 44 days by a toad, which is devoured by the little beast as soon as it hatches. A cockatrice hates everything that lives so fiercely that its glance turns the living to stone. Only a bold adventurer with a mirror can deflect its deadly gaze and defeat the cockatrice. Yes, these are the weakest ornithosaurs in the game. The rooster children incubated by toads are related to wyverns. They nest in caves and dark cellars. They have a high resistance to poisons and are difficult to knock down, though they are sensitive to silver and ornithosaur oil. A cockatrice will try to surprise its opponent, strike suddenly, and poison him with its venom. Simple people call the basilisk the king of the Zerrikanian deserts and often mistake it for a cockatrice. They claim that the beast is filled with such hatred towards all living things that even its breath is venomous and its glance turns the unwary to stone. The fact that witchers often encounter basilisks in dungeons and cellars contradicts the legend and suggests these creatures can reproduce under any conditions like many of their nasty monster brethren. In fairy tales, the only certain way to kill a basilisk is by holding a mirror in front of its eyes to divert its deadly gaze. Witchers reply that it is far better to smash the mirror on the creature's head. Basilisks are basically the elder, more stronger versions of cockatrices. They choose dark and damp places like caves and abandoned canal branches as their dwellings. They are immune to most poisons and resistant to stun attempts. They are sensitive to silver and ornithosaur oil, and a basilisk's most dangerous weapon is its venom, one of the strongest known toxins. Wyverns are unlucky to be frequently mistaken for dragons. Seeing a reptile approaching a flock of sheep, peasants panic. They expect it to breathe fire, massacre everyone, and abduct the local virgins. While it is true that wyverns hunt sheep, they neither breathe fire nor lay waste to whole villages, and they are completely indifferent to virgins. Not much to say about these things, except yeah, they are similar to tiny dragons, and probably the closest thing you'll get to dragons in most of The Witcher. Wyverns live in the wilderness or near human settlements. They are a natural element of an ecosystem, and are prized by druids who tame them. They are resistant to stun and poison attempts, sensitive to silver and ornithosaur oil, and they will dive at their opponents, try to knock them out, and poison them with venom. The female royal wyvern is smaller, but more cunning and venomous than her male counterpart. She can be aggressive towards both males and other females. She is a perfect example of how gender relations among humans have their source in the animal world. This is altogether not surprising. The royal wyvern is the last and most dangerous ornithosaur you will find in the first Witcher game. They are larger and more aggressive than their common cousins. They live in the wilderness, often in the mountains, as they like to build their nests on precipices. They attack any creatures entering their territory. They are resistant to stun attempts, immune to poison, and generally fearless. But they are sensitive to silver and ornithosaur oil. They'll dive at their opponents, try to knock them down, and poison them with venom. And they are more clever than common wyverns, and thus harder to defeat. Giant centipedes are said to have been raised in the Bruxae forest and released into the world by vengeful dryads. The creatures are believed to be invincible as they simply divide into two separate living beasts when cut in half. All this nonsense about giant centipedes only shows how intensely common people fear these venomous beasts, as they fear all things that are not human. Giant centipedes, again, are insects, which makes them terrifying in person, but these aren't nearly as bad as some of the other insects of the Witcher world. They're encountered in forests or on meadows in regions where they find many places to hide. Due to their simple nervous system, they see almost everything as a source of food. They are immune to blinding, bleeding, and knockdown attempts, and resistant to stun attempts. They are sensitive to silver and insectoid oil. One good thing is they are blind, but they sense tremors. In combat, they try to knock opponents down and poison them. Their acid venom causes pain. Kikimores are an insult to the gods, the filthiest creatures on Earth. They are repulsive in their resemblance to spiders, and even the smallest among them, the workers, are dangerous. So say the uneducated, superstitious, and stupid. The truth is far different. Kikimore workers rarely appear near human settlements, and even then they only attack when threatened. Is there anything more beautiful than a Kikimore? A symbol of hard work, resourcefulness, and caution? I've said it before, I'll say it again, any insects in the Witcher universe are extremely terrifying. Kikimore workers rarely appear far from their colonies unless in search of food. Immune to blinding and bleeding attempts, they are sensitive to silver and insectoid oil, but they are also susceptible to knockdown attempts. Though they are blind, they detect vibrations and have a keen sense of smell. They spit acid, and they use scent to communicate with other Kikimores. A more abominable beast is indeed hard to find. Not quite a cockroach nor a spider, it makes ladies faint and gentlemen feel disgusted. Kikimore Warrior reeks of the swamp. For this reason, I insist that exhibit number 88 be removed from the University Assembly Hall. And anticipating the question, what should be done with it then? I answer, throw it to the compost heap. Kikimore Warriors are the bigger, stronger Kikimores that protect the workers and the queens as they dig tunnels or look for food. They are immune to most effects, including blinding, and resistant to knockdown. They use scent to communicate with other Kikimores. They are sensitive to silver and insectoid oil, and during combat, warriors will spit acid, blinding their opponents and causing crippling pain. Some scientists claim that Kikimores behave like ants. They are divided into industrious workers and protective warriors. Life in a Kikimore colony is centered around a great, unceasingly procreating female. The landscape around the queen's nest looks like a desert, littered with the remains of unfortunate creatures which unwisely lingered in the area. Not even birdsong can be heard. The Kikimore Queen. I said insects were terrifying in this universe. If I had to face a Kikimore Queen, I would just lay down and let it kill me. It chooses quiet, damp, and dark places where she can lay eggs in peace. She surrounds herself with her offspring, creating a colony not unlike an anthill. She is resistant to all effects due to her very thick armor. A Kikimore Queen is very hard to injure, regardless of whether the sword is silver or steel. She moves very slowly, that is her only weakness. And she can knock down and kill a man with a single blow. Once you fell the Kikimore Queen, you can cut out her nerve and add just a bit of vitriol, quebrith, hydrogenum, and vermilion, and you can get yourself the Kikimore's ire. When you consume the Kikimore's ire, you will get the stamina upgrade mutation, which allows Geralt to consume selected ingredients raw instead of brewing potions from them. When you do this, the ingredient will restore 20 vitality, but also increase your toxicity. The first mage to create a Frightener was the infamous renegade Dagobert Sola, a diligent student of the Zerrikanian Masters of Alchemy and the supervisor of the Trial of the Grasses carried out at Kaer Morhen. Upon beholding the abomination he had created, Sola is said to have cried, "What have I done?" He destroyed the monster. His notes, however, survived. The Frightener is probably the first big boss monster you will encounter and fight in the game of The Witcher 1. It is found halfway through the prologue as Salamandra are attacking the fortress, and I am very thankful to say that these things are way easier to fight than the game makes it seem. Frighteners are very rare. They come into being as a result of magical experiments. To create a Frightener, a mage has to possess great power and a basic knowledge of mutation. They are immune to almost all effects, though you can use both steel and silver against them. Their biggest weakness, however, is that they are very sensitive to loud sounds at high frequencies. In combat, they rely on their size and strength and will try and knock their opponents down, and then deal a lethal blow. Once you have retrieved the parts from the Frightener in the prologue, you get a claw and an eye. That claw is going to be useful for the potion for Triss, which you need to progress the story, but that eye can be used with a little bit of vitriol, rebus, and quebrith in order to make your first mutagenic potion, the Frightener's Vision. What, in your opinion, is the best way to describe a Koshchey? Death. I'd call it death. Most mage creations are already pretty bad on their own, but the Koshchey is one of the worst. It is a mythical creature, born of magic. Only a mighty mage who knows Alzur's work can summon a Koshchey. It is resistant to most effects and susceptible to silver. Its critical effect is blinding. Make sure when you kill that Koshchey, you tear its heart out, because with just a little bit of... Actually not showing up there, that's a little glitched out. With a little bit of Aether and a bit of Hydragenum, you can make the Koshchey's core that should be appearing here. When you drink it, you will get a free gold talent to spend. Echinopsae are monstrous plants born of curses, which grow in places where terrible crimes have been committed if the crime in question was never atoned for. The beasts try to take their vengeance on criminals, but they do not spare the lives of innocents who haplessly enter their territory. Geralt first discovers these creatures in the outskirts, but soon realizes that the swamps around Vizima are filled to the brim with them. They grow in places where crimes have been committed, or on the graves of the victims of such crimes. They are immune to any effects which influence the mind. This includes fear, stun, and the Axii sign. They feel no pain and can neither be poisoned, blinded, knocked down, nor bled to death. That's a lot, but they are sensitive to silver and highly susceptible to incineration attempts. In battle, they may be rooted to the ground, but they shoot with poison thorns. Some crimes are so terrible that they fill people with terror and offend the gods. The criminal's ill will and the cruelty of his deed conceive a curse that brings the Archispore to life. The beast attacks innocent creatures hatefully, trying to take vengeance until justice is done. These are the older, much stronger variants of the Echinops. They grow in places where particularly cruel crimes have been committed, or on the tombs of the victims of such crimes. Archispores are immune to all mind effects. This includes fear, stun, and the Axii sign. They feel no pain and cannot be poisoned, blinded, knocked down, or bled to death. They are sensitive to silver and very susceptible to incineration attempts. They may shoot poison thorns. Once, an absent-minded mage created a golem, animated it by casting Alzur's thunder, and ordered his new servant to fetch water, before burying himself in his scholarly books. The golem kept carrying water day and night without pause, and ultimately flooded not only the mage's house, but the whole city. As you can see, my young students of the art, improper use of tools and a lack of elementary training may cause a tragedy. The golem is the big boss monster of Chapter 2, and serves as the first enemy that Geralt can't just cut up and kill. It is a creature made of stone or wood brought to life by a mage and animated with the use of magic. Its tough body is immune to sword blows and most effects. A golem can be stopped by its maker, however. Usually the giant is set in motion by a lightning bolt, so a major electric shock might incapacitate or even annihilate it. A golem will use its superhuman strength to knock down, stun, and crush opponents. If you take the obsidian heart from a golem and add just a little bit of vitriol, aether, quebrith, and hydranium in some alchemy, you will come out with the golem's pith. And if you drink that golem's pith, you will be bestowed the intelligence attribute Rising Moon, which gives your sign intensity plus 100% during moon rises. An Ifrit is a minor genie of fire, or, as some say, an elemental. It does not fulfill wishes, build palaces, or make anyone rich, but it serves mages who research the element of fire if they can force the creature to be obedient. Ifrits can only be captured by a mage who intimately understands the nature of flames, and has devoted himself completely to learning their secret. The creatures, with their connection to the element of fire, will judge their summoner and, if they find him worthy, will loyally serve him in all matters. These little guys don't serve much purpose in the game other than accompanying Salamandra mages who summon them in combat. They originally inhabit the plane of fire. Mages who have achieved mastery in controlling the element of fire are able to summon them and force them into servitude. They are immune to most effects, especially to incineration. Ifrits come from another world, but they cannot be knocked down or stunned. They are sensitive to silver and specter oil, and they may float in the air and use fire in combat. The Bloodzwiger, a grotesque monster from the swamps, causes terror among peasants because it pours digestive juices over the wounds of those who are still alive, and then dines on their half-digested intestines. These are giant, monstrous leeches that I wouldn't want anywhere near me, and to top it off, it's not over when they die. They mainly live in swamps and marshes. They are immune to poison and have low resistance to stun attempts. They are sensitive to silver and fire, and the strong style is most efficient against Bloodzwigers. Experienced Witchers warn against using the group style while fighting multiple. A dying Bloodzwiger explodes, spraying acid on its opponent. A skilled Witcher is able to kill the monster while avoiding the explosion. Archaeological research is the only source of knowledge about skullheads. Skeleton reconstructions make it possible to describe the creature's appearance and movement. Addressing his students, Professor Zendavoy Baron summed up research on the skullhead thusly: "We are more than lucky that the bastards died out. The game leads you to believe that these are from far in the future after the White Frost has hit, but these are actually ancient beings. These creatures died out centuries ago. Their strong skulls guarantee resistance to stun attempts, while their low center of gravity makes them hard to knock down. They are sensitive to silver, and skull heads will make use of their stout arms to stun and knock down their opponents." The Zeugl is the best example of a monster that has grown accustomed to human settlements. The beast feeds on the waste and filth produced by the city, so it need not hunt or fight to survive. It simply grows and gradually becomes a danger to people. This shows how detrimental continued degradation of the natural environment can be in the long run. Therefore, I implore the reader, respect nature. A Zoogle serves as the final required boss monster in the game. It lives in filth, in sewers or waste dumps, and they should be disposed of while they are young and small. A fully grown Zoogle is a formidable adversary, even for a Witcher. It is practically immune to sword blows, regardless of whether the sword is steel or silver. To kill a Zoogle, one has to remove its tentacles first. They shower their opponents with numerous tentacle hits. After you have defeated the Zoogle, you may extract its venom, throw in a little bit of Rebus and some Aether, and you can make the Zoogle's Vigor. When consumed, this will give you 1 silver and 1 gold talent to spend. So at the end of a lot of these guide videos, I like to do a tier list sometimes. I try and aim for 1 tier list per game set of guides, and I figured what better guide to do for the first Witcher game than one on all the boss monsters. I didn't mean guide, I meant what better tier list. This part of the video is extremely unscripted, sorry. But yeah, basically we're going to go through and we're going to rank everything that the game considers a boss monster. I'm going to rank it mainly on how the boss fight is. Is it challenging? Is it a good challenge? Is it boring? And yeah, pretty much go from that. We're going to try and go in order. So we're going to start with the Frightener. Now the Frightener here, it is a really good introduction to the game. It tells you that each monster will usually have a weakness, and if you expose that weakness, you won't have too much of a hard time with it. That being said, a chunk of it is just walking around and hitting the bells, and then you got all your Witcher friends to help you. I think it's a pretty mid-tier fight, if I say the least. Next, we move on to Chapter 1, and the only big boss monster here is the Hellhound. And I gotta say, the Hellhound, absolutely spectacular fight. There's no, certain thing you have to do to weaken it. It doesn't really have a weakness, honestly. It is just a full skill fight. This is the first time in the game that you feel really challenged, honestly. And if you can't get past the Hellhound, you're going to have a hard time just in regular stuff in the rest of the game. So I think, personally, this is going to be the only S-tier fight that I give in this game. Moving on to Chapter 2. Chapter 2, Into the Swamp, where we have the Golem at the end. The Golem, not really a fun fight. Mostly pretty much all you do if you're doing it the smart way is you're just walking around hitting the pylons so you can zap the Golem with lightning. Ideally, you shouldn't try and hit the Golem a single time, which is pretty boring. I would put it in F tier, but there is some stuff that you have to watch out for. You can't be in the triangle when the lightning goes off, or else you take a pretty deadly hit. And just for that, because you do have to somewhat pay attention, I'll put it C tier. It's not a good boss fight at all, but it's there, you know? Here in Chapter 3, we got a couple of monsters that we can put in here. We're going to start with the Werewolf. The Werewolf is a optional fight. You don't have to fight it, but when you do, I don't think it's really that powerful or anything. You can take it down pretty quickly. Doesn't have any hidden niche to it, but definitely does more than the Golem in terms of a boss fight. So I'm going to put that mid. The actual boss of Chapter 3 is going to be the Kikimore Queen, and let's just throw that shit in F tier. Again, it's like the Golem. If you're fighting it right, you shouldn't land a single sword blow on it. In fact, if it hits you at all, it will instantly kill you. The game does not want you to fight it. So you just run away from it and knock the ceiling down on it. Not a good boss fight, if you ask me. Throw it in F tier. Chapter 4, we got a couple of things here. We have the actual main boss, which is Dagon. And Dagon, he's a really interesting concept. He's a deity. You cannot do any damage to Dagon. Instead, he summons his worshippers, and you kill the worshippers, and as you kill the people that believe in him, he weakens, and that ends up killing him. They probably could have done it a little better, like have you at least fight him a little bit after you kill his worshippers, but no, you really don't fight him at all. But at least you're fighting something, so I gotta give it mid-tier. The other boss that we fight in Chapter 4, again, it's an optional one. You can fight a Witcher, his name is Berengar, and you know how anime and different games have that trope where the main antagonist is just a copy of yourself? That's kind of what this fight is. He's a Witcher, he's trained exactly like you are, he does all the roles and everything. And other than that, it just comes down to a normal fight. So that's pretty mid-tier if I have anything to say about that. Chapter 5, we get into some fun ones. We got the Striga, which isn't an optional fight, but it's optional how you complete it. If you do it the boring way, you will literally just run around the arena from it, not land a single blow for 5 minutes straight, which is pretty boring. That would put it in F tier. But I gotta say, if you fight it, that's what I'm gonna grade it on, if you actually fight it. It is a pretty skillful fight and kind of difficult to beat. It's definitely above B tier in how hard it is to kill. So, like I said, the Hellhound though, Hellhound takes the cake. I'm not going to put anything with the Hellhound. This is easy A tier. The other boss fight in Chapter 5 is going to be the Koshchey. And I was struggling with this one a little bit. Whether I wanted the Hellhound or the Koshchey in S tier. I only wanted to put one in S tier. And both of these are very skill-oriented fights. There's nothing you can do to weaken them, make the fight easier. It's either you can kill it, or you can't kill it. But the Hellhound won out, so this is going A tier. Definitely more than the Striga, though. I don't know if it matters too much, but I do rank this thing above the Striga. If we get into the epilogue, there's only one required boss fight here, and that's the Zeugl. The Zeugle's really interesting because it swaps between two phases. You either get its tentacles, where you have to just kill enough of them to get the head out, and then you get the head out where you can actually start doing damage to this thing. And if you don't watch it, these tentacles will literally rip you apart. This can be a challenging fight. I have died on it before, multiple times. So for that, I'm going to put that on A tier. All the actually challenging stuff is going to be A tier. And then we come to the Wild Hunt. The king of the Wild Hunt. I gotta say, kind of disappointing. You learn about it all throughout the game, and then you get the option to fight it at the very end, last thing you ever do. And it's just basically a normal fight. Yeah, it's not as easy as fighting Berengar or any of these other guys, but it's still just a normal, boring fight. So I think that lands the King of the Wild Hunt, the overarching antagonist, mid-tier B. So yeah, that's my tier list of how these boss fights actually rank. If you guys disagree or anything, just let me know. This is my personal experience, how I've played the game and how I've experienced these guys. Like I said, anything challenging, A or S tier. Anything weak, boring, that you hardly do anything, lower tier. Everything else is pretty much mid. So I think that's going to be the end of this video. Thank you for watching my entire video on all the bestiary entries. I thought it would be interesting to do, and I'll probably come back to this video in the future if I want to know anything specific about these guys. But that's going to be it for me. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.